We're in the workshop today and I've learned a few little hacks over the years I'm going to be sharing with you guys to make working on your e-bike that a little bit easier. One of the most important parts of your e-mountain bike is the drivetrain. Now, looking after your chain is certainly going to save on the wear of all those components. Now, when it comes to lubing the chain, if you haven't got a work stand, it means that the bike's going to be on the ground. Now, the only way to do that would be to back pedal the cranks, but as you can see, as I turn the cranks backwards, it isn't moving the chain at all. So a nice little hack is to wedge an Allen key into one of your chainring bolts, and whilst you back pedal that crank, it locks it against the crank arm, meaning that when you come to lube the chain, you've got all that movement rather than trying to either pick the back of the bike up or stick it up in the air to turn the cranks round. Real nice way of applying lube to that chain, super easy. One item on your e-bike that you will have to replace quite a lot is going to be the chain and the cassette. Now, the cassette, if you're running the Shimano system, comes on a nice little carrier that holds that cassette nicely when it's being shipped. Now, this saves a lot of time and a lot of faffing. I'm sure we've all been there trying to put that cassette on piece by piece, cog by cog, trying to line it up. Now this, all you need to do is find that master spline on the cassette holder, simply line it up with the cassette on the wheel, drop it down, then all you've got to do is just remove that last little lock ring and the final cog. Makes it a lot easier than faffing around trying to get that every single spacer and cog onto that free hub system. Now, the brakes on your e-mountain bike are super important, obviously for slowing you down from those high-speed downhill sections, but if those brakes are rubbing, you're going to be using a lot more battery power and therefore losing a lot of range out of your battery. Now, a real nice hack for setting up your calipers and not a lot of time if you have got a rubbing disc is by simply undoing the caliper bolts on the frame. So undo those nice so the caliper's free to move around. So you just give it a quick wiggle just to unseat it, and simply hold on your back brake lever, and you need to keep that back brake lever held down whilst you torque those bolts up to the manufacturer's specifications, and that way the caliper should sit nice and central. Then you're going to have a free running caliper in a simple matter of seconds. If that doesn't work, you might have to manually adjust the brake caliper. Now, traditionally, if you look down in the caliper, it's quite dark and you can't see quite what's going on between the brake pads and the brake rotor. So this little tip, just to get a white piece of card, place that underneath the rotor, and therefore it's going to project a lot more light into the caliper, and you can actually see the white background as you look through. And then it's time just to move that caliper by hand and torque those bolts up as you go. With a white piece of card, it's really easy to see once you've got that gap sorted and your brake shouldn't rub. Gear cables on your e-mountain bike will control a lot of the components. Things like the seat post dropper and your rear mech will have an outer and an inner gear cable. Now, it's quite common for these inner gear cables to get frayed. Not only do they look really messy, it just enhances the chance of that cable snapping further down the line. Now, a really good way of remedying this is just to grab the outer cable and twist it, and therefore you're going to weave all those fibers of the cable back together. Now, when it comes to end caps, you can either replace it with a standard end cap, which becomes a bit of a faff when you're replacing those inner cables, or you can simply dollop a bit of super glue on there. That way it's super easy to replace that cable over and over again, lubing it, replacing it. It's not going to be a faff, and you're going to get rid of all those frayed cables. Utilising the walk function on the e-bike motor can be a little hack for doing all those jobs on the back wheel and the drivetrain without pedaling the bike around. So obviously you're going to need your bike in a work stand for this one. So simply get either a clamp or zip ties, something that's going to activate the walk mode without you pressing it. It's going to leave both hands free to do some of those jobs. Things such as lubing the chain, you can check your gears out, you can check your brakes not rubbing. It is obviously super dangerous, so make sure you use your head on this one. Keep your hands away, keep loose clothing, long hair, things like that. Just be aware that that chain is in constant motion. It could get pretty messy. Nice little hack, but definitely use your head. The wheels on your bike can definitely take a beating over time. Now, unless you've got a fancy expensive wheel jig, then it is quite hard to true those wheels at home. But if you are fairly competent in truing the wheels, a nice little hack for you that you can do on your bike is simply placing a couple of zip ties on the chainstay and going from there. Okay, so I've placed a zip tie on each seat stay. I've trimmed it down nicely. So all I'm going to do is slide that up the seat stay and just position it a couple of millimeters away from the rim, and repeat that process on the other side. Just make sure they're balanced up nicely before you start. then all you got to do is just spin that wheel around and listen for any noise, and we'll look at which zip tie is moving or making that noise, and that denotes which way the wheel has moved. Then it's a simple case of going around with the spoke key and just adjusting that spoke tension where the rim is hitting the zip tie. You just start real nice and slowly, one by one, just moving those spokes around in the problem area, and you should see that rim shift across. Once that wheel's running nice and true, nice and straight, you're not going to hear any noise coming from those zip ties. So there you go, there's a few little hacks that you guys can get up to in your workshop. Let us know down in the comments box below about which hack you like the most, or which hacks you think we've left out of this one. But don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and check out our other video content, and find us on social media too.